After probably my worst rank split, I finally got back to Challenger. This split had a lot of changes and introduced a lot of new items, runes, and builds. I want to share with you my champ pool, draft process, and builds that I used to climb in 14.10 and 14.11. The 4 champions that I used to climb with were Janna, Nami, Sona, and Milio. I never deviated out of enchanters even in terrible drafts and matchups because it's always better to play a champion you're most comfortable with. Don't ever feel bad for sticking with your champions even if someone is being annoying about your picks. In solo queue, comp doesn't matter as much because it's almost guaranteed that one lane is going to feed, so that fights are going to be based around that player, and 99% of the time you won't coordinate well enough to execute how comps should be played out. I truly believe that it's 100 times better to pick a great counter matchup with your pool for your lane than to pick something to round out your team comp. You'll win more games if you do so because you can carry your lead that you've made to a win. While all the champs I played were enchanters, and it might seem like they do the same thing, each enchanter is very unique. My draft strategy for this pool was to blind pick Nami and counter pick with Janna, Milio, and Sona. Nami is one of the best enchanters to blind because of how versatile her kit is. She also got a giant buff in 14.11 that made her very broken. Her worst matchups are hook champs, like most enchanters, but I've played her enough to know how to navigate those lanes. I'm not going to go too into detail on that, but a lot of enchanter versus hook matchup revolves heavily around playing for prio level 1 and playing super safe after 3. My build on Nami is the same one from last split where I went W max, Airy, Domination secondary with double adaptive and scaling HP. For her items, I always went Mandate, Magias, and Moonstone and kept a slot open for pinks while spamming Elixir of Sorcery. I always went Flash Heal as well. This build revolves around her W scaling, which was changed in 14.7 where the base bounce effectiveness was reduced from 15% to 10%. The runes maximize AP while the items give her utility and amplifies the healing. Once you get Moonstone, you pretty much win any extended fights because you can just heal up your teammates. Try to get the double bounce of healing for your team rather than the double bounce for the enemy because your heals are a lot more valuable. People always ask me why I go Solstice Slay over Dreammaker, and it's because if you play a heal heavy champion, a lot of the times Dreammaker gets wasted. Slay is a lot better because Nami can trigger it easily with her E, and the extra movement speed helps combat her lack of mobility. For the rest of my champions, I mostly picked them in drafts where they would have great counter matchups. I picked Janna into engage supports, and into champions I have big engages. I'm a little embarrassed that I only have a 50% win rate with her being my most played, but it's because I was blind picking her at the start of the split and testing builds. Picking Janna into champions like Leona, Alistar, or Rel is usually a free win because you should be able to hard win lane. You should be looking to permanently harass the enemy with autos and W while holding Q to shut down any engage attempts. The only time engage supports have kill pressure against Janna is if they hit 6 or if they have flash, but even if they have flash you should be okay unless you mispositioned. The build that I found to be the most successful with is Airy with Domination secondary and adaptive movement speed with scaling HP while going W max. I know the most popular page for Janna is E max with Resolve secondary, but I personally have found more success with my setup. For her items, I like rushing Swifties and then going Helia into Moonstone into Redemption and then the control word item. This Janna build is very dynamic in that its early game focuses on movement speed and damage, and then it transitions very smoothly into a healing and shielding enchanter build. The power spike you get on Boots of Swiftness is no joke on Janna because her damage scales with her movement speed. You can surprisingly skirmish very hard with my W max build with just Boots of Swiftness. The next power spike is when you get Echoes of Helia, where you'll be heavily playing around cycling shards. Helia got changed in 4.2.10 and it's one of the most broken items when used by a champion that can utilize it well. It really does feel like the strongest first item spike in the game, and I feel like you can solo win fights if you cycle it well enough. Make sure to try and get 2 shards before healing and shielding to get the most value out of it. In this clip, I'm autoing and Wing to stack shards, and I'm able to consume 6 shards for the total team fight, which comes out to be 450 health and 360 magic damage on Helia alone. The amount of extra stats you can provide on Helia with Airy Shield, Janna Shield, and Heal from a summoner spell is the reason why this item is so broken. It gets even crazier once you have Moonstone because the health starts to chain from the Helia heal. The tricky part about Helia on Janna is that your E gets lower cooldown when you CC someone, but Helia gives you stacks when you hit someone, so they're the opposite on how you want to play out. Normally you want to open fights with E to get the lower cooldown, but if you don't have damage stacks you waste Helia, so you need to find that balance of doing both. There's a lot of skill expression and thinking involved in cycling Helia stacks with Janna. In an ideal scenario, you want to get 2 stacks between your E, heal, and R, but realistically it's pretty greedy trying to do that in a team fight. Using Q and W for damage stacks is bad sometimes because you won't get to use the E passive cooldown, and Janna's Q should be used to cancel engage abilities. It's very easy to autopilot to try and get the most Helia stacks, but you need to find that balance to optimize Helia Janna. Moving on to Milio, I picked him into drafts where I had 2 of 3 conditions. If my team has 2+ range carries, if the enemy has a long CD CC ability, or if I had a Lucian or Ashe AD carry. Enabling 2 or more range carries in fights, and cleansing a big CC ability will most of the time win you fights. You actually get a lot of opportunities to play with double range carries because champions like Akshan, Kindred, Twisted Fate, Tristana, Azir are all very popular. Milio with Asher Lucian feels like the new and better Lucian Nami, and it's 10 times easier to execute and a lot stronger. Earlier I said that for solo queue, counterpick is more important for lane than draft, but it feels like Milio is an exception if you have at least 2 of 3 conditions because you set yourself up for so many win conditions. Trust me, if you play him in the right team, you'll be surprised at how easy it is to win with him. For his runes, I like going Airy with Resolve Secondary and CDR Adaptive and Scaling Health with Emax. For the items, I always go Helia first, and then I'll flex the second item. If the enemies have a lot of healing, Oblivion Orb is really nice because your passive applies it with your teammates. If I have 3 auto range carries, I'll go Ardent, and then if none of my range carries are doing well, I'll go Moonstone. Another big reason why Milio is so strong right now is because of how well he can use Echoes of Helia. He is one of the best, if not the best user of the item because his passive not only gives him damage shards from shielding or healing his teammates, but he also has multiple sources to consume them. I truly believe Helia is so broken that if you can abuse it well, you can auto win teamfights because of how hard you can stat check the enemy. My biggest advice for this build is to auto a lot during teamfights because those shards will add up. Moving on to Sona, I only picked her into enemy bot lanes that had no kill pressure. That is mostly into enchanters or melee supports where I could outrange them and outscale them. I love going the first strike build and just farming people off cooldown. I think first strike is currently one of the most broken keystones, and if you can abuse it well, you can accelerate your build very fast. That is very dangerous for an enchanter because a lot of their identity revolves around stat checking the enemies with items. Sona is one of the hardest scaling enchanters, and with enough gold you can just 1v9 games. For her runes, I went first strike with Resolve Secondary and CDR Adaptive and Scaling Health with Wmax. For her items, I rushed Helia into Moonstone, and depending on if we had a lot of AP, I'd go Staff of Flowing Water or Dawn Core. I know a lot of Sona players like going tier for the extra mana, but I think Helia is so broken that I don't want the 400 gold setback. I feel like the sooner I am able to buy Helia, I just win any team fight while everyone is on one item. Sona has pretty bad mana problems early, but if you manage your mana well and eat your biscuits, you'll be okay. I also run free boots, so if you compare my build to traditional Sona builds, you get Helia 700 gold earlier from just items. If you factor in the gold from first strike, I am legit speedrunning my first item and it's so worth it. Once you get 3 items on Sona, you become Exodia and just win the game. Generally, I think Dawn Core is a great item, but way too expensive to build on enchanters, but with first strike you can realistically build it. Into the right draft and with my rune setup, you can easily create enough gold to afford it. First strike is actually going to be nerfed next patch, so I'm not sure if it will still be good. I know people are going to ask why I don't go Dreammaker, and it's because I don't like how her auras will randomly trigger it due to Airy. Also, like I said earlier, because Sona spams heals, I feel like it gets wasted a lot, so I'd much rather have it in something I can control more. If you get good at drafting with your champ pool, games become 100 times easier. Remember, for solo queue, it's more important that you play the champions that you are actually familiar on rather than to play for the draft. I'm not sure how long my builds will be meta, but I'll be updating them in the comments if they get cycled out. Thank you so much for watching, happy to answer any questions.